east, but eventually temperatures lift through the night as the winds pick up. It's a bright start for parts of the Midlands, East Anglia, southern England first thing, and skies brighten through the morning for Scotland and Northern Ireland. Blustery showers push in here, but also some sunny spells. It's in between where we've got some heavy and persistent rain. Northern England, eventually the Midlands, Wales, and then by the end of the day, Cornwall as well as Devon. Temperatures aren't up to much either, 8, 9, 10 Celsius, but not feeling very pleasant where we've got the wind and the rain. Now into Saturday night, the rain tends to sink south. By this stage, it's lighter and patchier, but during the early hours of Sunday, the next batch of wet and windy weather starts to arrive into southwest England as well as Wales. Drier to the east and to the north, some clear spells for central and northern Scotland, a few showers here. But Sunday, really, for the vast majority, soon turns wet and windy. From the west, bands of rain and wind sweep through, coastal gales for the south coast of England, and the most heavy and persistent rain affecting Wales. And really through the course of Saturday and Sunday, because of the accumulated rain, we could see some issues here. Monday is also very changeable, with spells of rain or showers moving south, likewise on Tuesday.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before. It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome. No, you haven't got the date wrong. I'm here on a Friday evening in a completely unfamiliar part of the studio for one night only. Coming up on the show, I'll be catching up with the epic adventure of the Canadian truckers and hearing how their protest against vaccine mandates has now spread to Europe. Even as I speak, a convoy of vehicles is en route to Paris, where military vehicles have formed up ready to turn them away. My guest for Friday Fizz is technology entrepreneur Jennifer Arcuri, who'll be giving us her interpretations of the imminent loosing of lockdown restrictions and much else besides. And I'll talk to British politician Brian Monteith about whether Scottish First Minister Nicola Sturgeon is right to retain emergency COVID powers north of the border, while England prepares to take the high road to freedom. But first, the news headlines with Bethany Elsey.
Thanks, Neil. I am Bethany Elsey in the GB newsroom. We'll start with some breaking news in the last half an hour. British nationals are being urged to leave Ukraine while commercial means are still available. The Foreign Office has also advised Brits not to travel to the country. Speaking in Moscow earlier, the Defence Secretary Ben Wallace warned Russia could invade Ukraine at any time. But he also said the Russian government assured him they have no intention of invading their neighbour.
I was clear about the tragic consequences that any invasion of Ukraine could have. We listened to the assurances given by Minister Shoigu and indeed General Gerasimov that they would not invade Ukraine. And we urged dialogue as a way through to address any concerns that the Russian government may have.
The Home Secretary says the next Metropolitan Police Commissioner, who will replace Dame Cressida Dick, faces stark challenges. Priti Patel says the culture at the force and the behaviour of its officers needs an overhaul by a new leader. GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White has this update.
Here at the Home Office, Priti Patel has confirmed that she has now begun the process to find a new Metropolitan Police Commissioner. Any replacement for Cressida Dick, she says, would have to show strong and decisive leadership to deal with the institutional issues that have plagued the Metropolitan Police in recent years. It is also the most political of policing roles, having to straddle the competing demands of a Labour London Mayor and a Conservative Home Secretary.
Now, the UK's Health Security Agency has announced a patient in Bedfordshire has died with a confirmed case of Lassa fever. It's after 2 cases of the Ebola-like virus were confirmed in England earlier this week. Officials say risk to the public remains very low. A Canadian region has declared a state of emergency in response to protests against COVID restrictions. Ontario's Premier Doug Ford says he'll urgently enact laws to crack down on those who interfere with the free flow of goods and people. Lorry drivers have been blocking roads in the capital, Ottawa, all week.
We're now 2 weeks into the siege of the city of Ottawa. I call it a siege because that's what it is. It's an illegal occupation. This is no longer a protest.
The UK economy grew by a record 7.5% in 2021, following a large fall the year before due to the pandemic. Official figures show GDP grew by 1% in the final quarter last year, despite the impact of the Omicron variant in December. Spain has dropped its travel entry requirement for British children over the age of 12 to be fully vaccinated. They'll now only have to show proof of a recent negative COVID test. Meanwhile, fully vaccinated passengers will no longer need to take a test when arriving back in the UK. TV, online and DAB plus radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Neil Oliver.
Welcome back. Are we a nation? Is Great Britain a united kingdom or not? I ask these questions in all seriousness. I've said before, and I will happily say again, that I am British. My nationality is a state of mind, and I have no intention of changing either. I was born in Britain. I am British, and it is as a British citizen that I will live out my days. For the 2 years of the COVID outbreak, Nicola Sturgeon, First Minister of Scotland, has taken every opportunity to ignore the very existence of this Great Britain, of this United Kingdom. Despite having relied entirely on torrents of cash from Westminster, British cash, to pay her way out of the disaster, she has sought always to pose as a little Scottish queen. In the face of what was billed as the greatest threat to our well-being in generations, in perhaps 100 years, she has indulged in blatant politicking, desperate to be seen as a leader on the world stage. Always she has made it her #1 priority, even in this most difficult of times for the British people, to drive wedges between Scotland and England and to behave as though Scotland is her own private fiefdom. In a time of national crisis, national emergency, when it ought surely to have been appropriate to pull tight the ties that bind us as inhabitants of these small islands, Sturgeon has endeavoured to pull Scotland away and keep it only for herself to rule. Every time Boris Johnson has made an announcement about lockdown or other restrictions, Sturgeon has revelled in the opportunity always to take a slightly different path. He says tomato, she says tomato. For Sturgeon, COVID has been a hammer with which to strike blows designed always and only to shatter Great Britain. Despite her grandstanding, Scotland has not in any way had a better war than anywhere else. In the end, it was all for naught, but Sturgeon's self-aggrandisement. Most recently, Johnson has announced his intentions to end restrictions in England altogether. We await the reality of whatever that actually means, but on the face of it, England may lead the world towards the exit from the pandemic. British citizens in England are understandably excited by the prospect of nudging ever closer to something at least faintly resembling the normality we used to know. What is easily overlooked, however, is that Sturgeon has no such intentions for Scotland. Already the government in Holyrood has decreed that existing COVID powers are to be extended for another 6 months. Sturgeon and co will not let it go. And so I ask again, is Great Britain a nation or not? In short, why must British citizens in Scotland continue to labour in the shadow of a government wielding emergency powers in the absence any longer of an emergency, while fellow British citizens south of the border begin moving towards the sunlit uplands? Amongst much else these past 2 years have laid bare is the calibre, or rather the lack of it, of so many elected representatives and also of leaders of nations. Justin Trudeau in Canada, Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand, Mark Drakeford in Wales, and Nicola Sturgeon in Scotland have emerged as nothing more than petty tyrants, woefully overwhelmed by events. Suddenly handed hitherto undreamed of powers over their citizens' lives, they have grown drunk on that power. Now, when the worst is behind us and they ought to be surrendering that power they ought never to have assumed in the first place, and setting free the people, they cling white-knuckled to the reins. Scotland is and has been for years a severely divided place under Sturgeon and her SNP, a one-party state devoid of meaningful political opposition and with much of its mainstream media pathetically and shamefully intent on giving her the easiest of rides. Across the board, the SNP government have failed on health, on education, on business, on infrastructure and civil engineering, on anything and everything a person might name, and they continue to fail. The COVID years have enabled Sturgeon and her cohort to divert attention from their innumerable failings. Now, when the reckoning is at hand, the prospect of contemplating life without COVID powers is plainly unthinkable. For years, there has been a sinister move against the fabric of the family in Scotland. A named person scheme that would have slipped a state-sponsored outsider between every child and his or her parents was stymied only by the highest court in the land. More recently, Sturgeon's government has empowered children as young as 4 to choose their own genders, to answer to different names at school, all without parents even being informed. Shh, no need to tell mum and dad. Also underway in Scottish high schools now is a so-called census that asks school children questions of the most intimate and intrusive sort about their sex lives. For the longest time, it has seemed to me that what Nicola Sturgeon and her SNP desire and require is not independence, but privacy. They want to draw the curtains across the border and conduct their business out of sight of questioning eyes. British citizens in Scotland have suffered enough and long enough on account of Nicola Sturgeon and her fixation with her own image and her own power. British citizens in Scotland deserve better, much better. We deserve to be treated not as Queen Nicola's subjects, but as the British citizens we are. Joining me now is the Scotsman, columnist and former member of the Scottish Parliament, Brian Monteith. Good evening, Brian. Thank you for making time for us this evening.
Evening, Neil. Good to be with you.
Thank you. How do you rate First Minister Sturgeon's handling of the past 2 years?
One has to wonder where to start. I think actually abysmal. It was an opportunity, if I, for instance, had been her advisor, to say, here, if you want to do politicking, here's a chance to actually unite the nation. Here's an opportunity to pull everyone together, to put the divisions that we had because of the referendum, and which she's since stoked up, using Brexit as a tool, to pull everyone together and say we must face what is coming and ensure that we are all at one, we are in harmony. But instead of doing that, she actually made it political. At every opportunity, she has tried to measure Scotland's performance in the pandemic through her ministry against what happens in England. Not the rest of the UK, but England. And in doing her daily briefings and saying it's not political, she would then have political diatribes. And the media, being what they're like, and we see it in Westminster too, instead of asking her questions about the pandemic, might ask her questions about Boris Johnson or what's happening in England. And of course, rather than say, no, this is about the pandemic, this is about COVID, she would say, oh, well, it's a dreadful thing that's been done by Boris Johnson, blah, 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 blah. She did not take the opportunity, which she could have done, to heal the wounds. And as you said, there has been no difference really in the outcomes. So what was it for?
The moral high ground, I would suggest, was there to be taken by a leader who said, we are one small archipelago. You know, we are X millions of people, and we face a common challenge, and you know, all else must be set aside for now while we take care of each other. And yet, as you say, and agreeing with me that she took the other path and made it something so divisive. Do you feel it seems to me that this emergency has exposed the true nature of leaders? You know, we've seen the behaviour of Justin Trudeau in Canada, Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand, Mark Drakeford in Wales, and of course Nicola Sturgeon in Scotland. And I think it hasn't shown them in a good light, I would suggest.
Well, I think that's right. I think that what we've seen particularly as an error is that from the get-go, Boris Johnson and his cabinet made a mistake. And that was to decide, no doubt with advice from their officials, that this was a public health problem and it should be treated as a public health problem and therefore devolved. And what this meant was that because public health is devolved to the different administrative jurisdictions, that Nicola Sturgeon and Cardiff and Belfast actually then were given the responsibility of being different. And they've all grasped it in certain respects. And the result is that we've had this ridiculous competition about outcomes, and politicians, as politicians do, seeking to parade themselves as somehow being better than the other jurisdictions. It should have been, and it could have been, treated as a national emergency. And had it been treated as a national emergency, then it would have been solely as a British, a UK-wide issue, and we would all have been treated the same. But instead, people like Nicola Sturgeon, who by their own measurement, her ratings have gone down, it's not been working for her, by her own measurement, she's failed.
And what about, how do you feel the atmosphere in Scotland? You know, given that we always have to look on at what always seems to be much better news coming out of England when it comes to the relaxation of restrictions. And, you know, we're sort of, our noses are pressed up against the glass, saying, what about us? And now this idea that the Scottish Government is retaining those emergency powers, when, if you look on at what's happening or seems to be about to happen in England, there is no emergency. What do you make of that?
Well, such is the confusion in Scotland that one could say there is no emergency either. Because when we look at how certain areas such as football and rugby can suddenly be released, but they're still ensuring that kids in school wear masks, it's so confusing. People just really don't know what's going on. And they look at what's happening in England and say, how is it so different? Well, it shouldn't be different. The truth is, for all, and I know many people have great criticism of Boris Johnson, for all Boris Johnson has maybe made mistakes in some of the judgment calls he might have made in regard to the pandemic, the truth is that we have seen probably a quite clear differentiation between Boris Johnson and Nicola Sturgeon. It's hard not to believe that Boris isn't at heart a liberal who would prefer not to introduce these restrictions. There's no sense that he's gagging to tie us all up in restrictions. There's a sense that he wants reluctantly to bring them in, but as quickly as possible, pull them back. Whereas with Nicola Sturgeon, what we get is the sense that she's reveling in the fact that people have difficulty going to church, people have difficulty going to nursing homes, people have difficulty meeting people, that you can't stand up, you can't dance in a pub, you can't sing, all these restrictions that meanwhile in the rest of England, people are having a good time. And so we've seen the development of two quite different characters. And I would put it there that it's really only the sort of Scottish mentality of a sense of superiority that sometimes pervades, that we're somehow better than the English, that people defend Nicola Sturgeon. I'm sure in people's hearts of hearts, many think it shouldn't be like this in Scotland.
To look at it more widely, is devolution, is the devolved settlement as it stands, is it working for Scotland when you come to look at how we have fared during the last 2 years? And I don't just mean COVID. Across the board, with all the various exploits of Nicola Sturgeon and her government, is devolution working?
Well, I have to fess up and say I ran the campaign against devolution back in 1997. I was very concerned about what it would mean for being British and for the UK. And so I'm looking through it in that context. But the truth of it is that I see Holyrood going further and further away from what matters to Scottish people. I see it introducing laws that people scratch their heads with and wonder, what is this about? And I see it having policies like cutting the bottom of classroom doors off to help the airflow through. I see the First Minister talking one day about the English paying for Scottish pensions if there's independence, and then having to backtrack when it's pointed out it is utter nonsense. I see the parent-guardian issue that you've brought up yourself. There's so many things we could go through. The banning of singing songs at football matches. These are what you would call student politics. The issues that people generally just not understand why they're having laws made on this. And I see more and more people, and particularly in social media where they have their own voice, talking about getting rid of Holyrood. Because I think, in the past they would not have said this, but now they're saying, actually, this isn't working and it doesn't represent us. So I think Nicola Sturgeon is the greatest enemy of devolution, because she herself and her party, who follow her under a sort of Stalinist regime, dare not oppose her, and they're giving it a bad name.
The greatest enemy to devolution. It's a fascinating line to end on. Brian, thank you very much for some fascinating insights there. Pleasure to speak to you, and I hope our paths cross again. Thanks for just now.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you, Neil.
After the break, I'll be getting your reaction to whether we are still a United Kingdom. gbviews@gbnews.uk is the email you need. Plus, we'll be talking about the freedom convoys taking place in France and across the world, despite bans imposed by governments. I'll see you shortly.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
We've got a big Saturday for you on GB News. From 6 a.m, it's breakfast with Stephen and Anne. At 10, join Esther and Philip for the Saturday selection. Alistair, Darren and Nana take you through the day. And don't miss Neil Oliver Live at 7 p.m. At 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight, followed by Headliners. That's Saturday on GB News.
Welcome back. As I hoped, as I expected, you've been reacting to what I had to say at the top of the show, so I can get to them now. Stephen says, no, we're now a disunited kingdom, tearing itself apart through debilitating devolution, divisive identity politics, and continuous Westminster mismanagement. Soylent Green says, no, divide and conquer has worked. The National Socialists have their jackboots on the neck of Scotland. Yvonne says, no, we are not a united kingdom at all. Restrictions need to be dropped in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, as well as England, and the Coronavirus Act repealed. Only then will it be over. And Scarlett says, we are far from a united kingdom, thanks to Sturgeon and her separatists. Mistake Boris made at the start of this was to allow differing approaches by the devolved administrations. It was a national pandemic and legislation passed by Westminster should have ensured parity. There you go, fairly strong and fairly similar themes there. Moving on. Police in Paris are preparing to try and turn back a so-called freedom convoy of motorists bound for the French capital. Inspired by the Canadian truckers presently occupying their own capital, Ottawa, French opponents of COVID restrictions have united for a face-off with French President Emmanuel Macron just 2 months ahead of the upcoming presidential elections in April. Among the protesters are veterans of the Gilets jaunes, the yellow vest protesters that so effectively rattled Macron's presidency for many months with their demands that the urban elites pay more attention to the hardships of ordinary French people. Joining me now from Paris is journalist Peter Allen. Hello, Peter. Thank you for making time for me.
Hello, Neil.
If I can start, Peter, how does the French Freedom Convoy compare, in scale at least, to that that's been going on in Canada?
Well, we're going to find out very soon is the simple answer, really, Neil. The convoy is on its way to Paris. It was meant to arrive a little bit early this evening, but it's taking a little bit of time. I think the original idea was full impact on a Friday night, but it looks as though they're going to be concentrating on Saturday now. The weather's going to be quite good tomorrow. They're hoping lots of other people will turn up. Not just from the south of France. The main convoy set off for Nice early in the week, but all points of the compass, really, coming from the west in Brest. They're coming from Dijon in the east. And we'll see tomorrow what the hope is of the organisers. It will be a repeat of the really quite spectacular Yellow Vest protests, which started in around November 2018 and went on for pretty much 2 years, up until lockdown, when centre Paris looked like a war zone at times. There was huge dissent being shown by lots of ordinary men and women. And this is what the organisers of this convoy are hoping will happen tomorrow. They don't clearly just don't want to just blockade the roads. They want to be out on the pavements as well, confronting the forces of law and order and trying to persuade the government of their cause, Neil.
Now, the protest in Canada has been famously good-natured, peaceful, all sorts of scenes of people handing out free food and almost like a carnival atmosphere. What do you suspect will be the atmosphere in Paris? Will it model itself on that peaceful example, or do you think things could be different?
Well, Paris is traditionally a protest city, of course. The modern Fifth Republic is built on revolution and street violence and all kinds of very, very violent events. And that is actually, believe it or not, quite an accepted part of the political protests over here. If I told you back in November 2018, I witnessed some of the worst riots I've ever seen in France, on the Champs-Élysées, right in the center of the city. There were all kinds of public monuments, banks, restaurants, businesses being set on fire. There were huge fights going on with the police. What did President Emmanuel Macron do? He backed down. He agreed that fuel surcharges he had added to the cost of petrol were going to be taken away. They won policy initiatives. And they know that if they come into Paris tomorrow and they do very little and they just kind of sit around, there won't be a huge amount of impact. That sounds very, very brutal, but that's how it is in France. And so I suspect that, of course, many of the organisers and many of those taking part are very much against violence and are peaceful people like the rest of us. But if I told you there's 7,000 police being put on the streets first thing in the morning, armoured cars in the city, they've already been out on the ring road around the city, and they'll all be out there tomorrow. I can bet you anything, tear gas will start to be used. There'll be lots of paramilitaries out with guns, clearly plastic bullets. So they won't be killing people, but they will certainly be confronting the protests with plenty of arms. And so, yes, I suspect there will be violence, Neil.
Now, the Freedom Convoy in France, it has support from some French politicians, does it not? And also some French media getting behind it as well.
Yes, absolutely. It's got support from the left and the right. It may be that there are some, certainly voters, who are rather moderate, who support them in principle. The politicians really coming out in favour of the convoy, Eric Zemmour, are we allowed to use that expression nowadays? He's of the far right. There's no doubt about that. He is passionately in favour of replacing the current government. Got a lot of very extreme ideas. He wants ordinary French men and women to support him. A lot of those ordinary French men and women on that convoy, he believes. That's why he's supporting them. Marine Le Pen, who is a lot more moderate now, but still of the right, she has expressed support limited support for the convoy, although she is saying that they should much rather support her, particularly at the ballot box in April. And then you've got left-wing parties who aren't particularly powerful in France now, also saying that these are the aggrieved people of provincial France. They're not the rich Parisians. They are ordinary men and women living in towns and villages and on the outskirts of major cities. They all rely on their cars. And a lot of them are very anti-French government. So yes, there's wide-scale support for them, certainly.
It's a powerful cocktail, I think, isn't it? In Canada, the truckers are very much identified and are working people, regular working stock. And in France, what was, I think, so powerful around the Gilets jaunes, and if it's the case that they are in the DNA of the Freedom Convoy, again, it's the working people, it's the ordinary working people, and it's very hard to imagine how it can ever look good, either in Canada or in Paris, when a government deploys armoured vehicles and tear gas and plastic bullets against the salt of the nation, the real people of the nation. It's not a good look for any government, be it in Canada or in Paris.
That's absolutely right. The optics are absolutely terrible. France is nominally a land of liberty, of human rights, a place where anybody can be viewed as a French citizen, as entitled to all kinds of rights. And yet you have what amounts to the forces of law and order supporting the French establishment with thousands of paramilitary police. This isn't just an ordinary police force putting on their helmets at the weekend. These are trained officers who are there to restrain the general population. And myself, having covered demonstrations all over France for many, many years, it really is quite extraordinary, the methods used. Baton charges, the use of tear gas is absolutely extraordinary. And of course, that tear gas doesn't just hold back a few enthusiastic demonstrators. It spreads everywhere. It spreads all over the city. And ditto the tactics of the CRS. That's I suppose the elite units of the French riot police. That's the Republican security companies. They were set up after the war by Charles de Gaulle. They are absolutely ruthless, and they will go out and hit anybody at the first sign of trouble. So the optics are quite extraordinary. But I have to keep saying there's nothing new in this. This is the nature of French political discourse, French political fighting. It's been exactly the same for years, for decades, for centuries. This is what happens. The street is wide open for people to go out there and make a nuisance of themselves. The police reply in kind, and inevitably the politicians listen to those who show how angry they are. The politicians listen to the street. It's almost as if they expect this kind of street theatre. Of course, it's much more serious than just theatre. A lot of people get hurt at these demonstrations. People end up with terrible injuries. And as you say, it's a terrible look. It's the forces of law and order representing the French Republic, beating up citizens of the French Republic. It's an extraordinary sight.
Is it still the case that the Freedom Convoy is bound for further afield than just Paris? I've seen talk of them taking it all the way to the heart of the EU in Brussels. Is that still on the cards?
It is. The Freedom Convoy has been banned from Paris this weekend. I have to say that when you try to ban any kind of political demonstration in France, it tends to increase the number of people at the demonstration, and they turn up regardless. It's going to be impossible for the police to stop huge numbers of people getting into the city, right? They may leave a load of their cars outside of the city, but you would imagine if there really is the critical mass, the huge numbers behind this demonstration. They will find a way of getting the Champs-Élysées to the centre of the city. But after that, what the plan is for the convoy is to head to Brussels, where I think it's also be banned as well. So you'll have a very, very similar staged confrontation, as it were. Brussels, of course, is seen as being very, very important. France, one of the great founding fathers of the EU, they push a lot of their powers over to Brussels. And so the Freedom Convoy clearly has a lot of interest in decision makers over there. And remember, of course, that France is the current president of the EU. It's got that position for 6 months. So that's another reason why French citizens protesting the French government would also see it as being extremely important to put pressure on the EU in Brussels and indeed in Strasbourg, Neil.
Peter, it's a fascinating story. It feels like history in the making. I think watching this call for freedom spread, from one side of the globe to the other. I could talk about it for hours, but sadly I have to move on to other topics. But thank you so much for making time for me this evening. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you. After the break, the first edition of what we're calling Oliver's All Sorts. Send your questions to gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet me at gbnews. My breath is bated at the near prospect. Plus, we'll be kicking off Friday Fizz with technology guru Jennifer Arcuri. See you shortly.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
We've got a big Saturday for you on GB News. From 6 a.m, it's breakfast with Stephen and Anne. At 10, join Esther and Philip for the Saturday selection. Alistair, Darren and Nana take you through the day. And don't miss Neil Oliver Live at 7 p.m. At 9, it's Mark Dolan Tonight, followed by Headliners. That's Saturday on GB News.
Welcome back. It's time now for Friday Fizz. And my guest today has hit the headlines several times following her friendship with Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Jennifer Arcuri is here. Hello, Jennifer. Hello, Jennifer.
Hello, how are you?
I'm very well. You and I were supposed to meet some months ago. You were scheduled to be a guest, and it didn't happen. So I'm delighted that we're that we're finding time to be together, even if only remotely. I have a glass of fizz. I'm wondering, do you have likewise?
I got, as you requested, a glass of water. I don't have any beer. We're moving.
I raise a glass to you, Jennifer. Good health to you. If I may, can I just start quite simply by asking you how you came to come into the orbit of Boris Johnson in the first place? How did that happen?
I was bored in my MBA, and I wanted to find new ways of building networks in London. So I went to the British Venture Capital Association, and being new into London, they welcomed me with open arms.
So you spent time with Boris Johnson. Now, is the Boris Johnson who's tasked with handling this pandemic and everything else the same Boris Johnson that you knew and spent time with? Do you recognise them as the same person, if I can put it that way?
It's interesting. I get this question quite a bit. And, you know, it's not just TV presenters who ask me and the many, many voters who are watching in disbelief at his actions at this point. But it's his close friends and people that grew up with him have all asked the same thing. What happened to the guy we knew? Where is he? Who is that? What is that? You know, the scripted dialogue, the very calculated, you know, almost as if it's been delivered, you know, in a certain way, what is said to the public, how it's said, what he agrees with, what, you know, this is very calculated. I mean, he's become everything that which he most hated. I mean, I told him once, you are never to become this, you know, ridiculous carbon copy robot. And that's exactly what he's become. So in that question, no, I don't recognize him at all.
So the Boris that you knew, you know, when it comes to things like the green agenda, net zero, and all of that, were those subjects and ideas close to that Boris's heart or not?
No, not at all. Not even kind of. In fact, so much so there was a video many years ago of Boris in a room. It was caught on camera where he was screaming all kinds of obscenities and you know, climate change. This is BS. I mean, he wasn't ever interested in this. He's been told to care about this. He's been instructed. He's reading a manual, a script, you know, whatever they told him to do. This is not something that he, you know, ever cared about. And for someone to say, but, you know, you learn, you know, maybe someone has educated him. That's ridiculous. It's in his nature. He's not someone to ever care about this stuff. And that video that was sent to Guido Harry was sent, obviously, with best intention to be destroyed. But that's the real man on camera, not this puppet on camera that you're seeing in Number 10 now.
So how can that happen to such a character? It seemed to me really that he went into hospital with COVID as the familiar man that I, you know, recognised from his general behaviour, and he came out fundamentally altered. So, you know, does he strike you as someone that, I don't know, is he politically compromised? Is that what has you know, made him drop his natural inclinations and take a scripted path?
I mean, I would say, and I've spoken about this, you know, within my Telegram channel, you know, there is something that happens to you before you take office when you become a world leader. There are certain rituals, let's call them for fun, that happen. And then when one takes office, one has to adhere to those around him, obviously seeking endorsement and validation from those, especially within the establishment, would have been very, very important to Boris. And then, you know, per the episode, the entire nation watched one man entering the hospital and another one, you know, leaving. I've had several sources confirm, you know, this isn't the same man. However we want to You know, I'm not the one to look into this. I'm not an investigative journalist. Someone should be looking into this. This isn't the same man by a long shot, not just in spirit and character and demeanor. We're talking completely different. And this guy, I mean, the way the whole government is shaped. And, you know, from day one, they sent the public into a tizzy, you know, of all these kind of silly, nonsensical, you know, articles to get you upset and distracted. I was one of them. I come from a place, you know, of knowing how the media will drive a narrative to keep you distracted from that which is most important. And Boris has been complicit with a lot more than what is making the news. I mean, they want you upset about Partygate. Oh, please, please, let's talk about what's really happening in this nation. The silence and the censorship. There's an ongoing, very live police investigation, crime number 602-9679/21. The media can do whatever they want to try to discredit this investigation. It's happening, and it's happening under Johnson's watch. His entire administration is looking this way, demanding the public follow them, and no one's questioning it. To the point you and I spoke about earlier, we just don't understand what's happening.
You're right to say that claim is circulating freely and widely on social media, but police sources are saying that there is no such investigation.
I understand. I know the people involved in this
circulating.
Yes, but there are too many good people involved in this. They are not lying. They do not gain anything from lying and spreading misinformation. I don't understand why this is being covered up the way it is. But just to say that the evidence is not going anywhere. Dr. Sam White said it yesterday on social, or the other day on social media, and I retweeted the hell out of it. You know, they do have it all. The evidence is speaking. The science is actually there. And it shows horrifying data that would hold this administration complicit and culpable and responsible for dismissing all the many people who tried to come forward, who were dismissed as kooky conspiracists. I have been called one all year. They've called me everything. I have nothing to gain by sitting here and speaking the truth. You know, everything to lose as I feed the trolls, because we have to look into this. I understand there's one police officer saying it's not happening, but I guarantee you there are people working on this. There are at least 4 detectives involved. There is a fierce team, a resilient team that are not backing down. And I don't mean to get all shouty and emotional on this, but I want to make it crystally clear to the public that this is not something that can be dismissed or ignored, even if the media want to say it's not happening. It's a live investigation with real people, not crisis actors, not people being paid to profit off vaccine injury and make up news. This is nonsense. The truth is there are lots of people that are coming down with all kinds of things that didn't happen before, but now they are. And instead of questioning every different possible variable, there's only one side the media delivers, one-sided censor. And
Jennifer,
this
Jennifer,
is
this could what you're saying there, what you're alleging there, it could only ever be borne out by data. You know, you're referring to
yes, absolutely,
data, all sorts of information that is not in the public domain, unless and until that comes into the public domain. What you're saying there will continue to be that.
I understand. I understand.
Do you think that the information, credible information, will emerge? You know,
yes, on my life, sir. On my life, yes. These people are not letting this go. There's lots of information on Telegram that never makes it anywhere else because it's dismissed, and you know, people laugh at us and they call us all kinds of crazy names. I'm telling you, this is a spoiler alert. Everyone in the public must wake up and ask questions, not follow blindly, not believe in blind, this authority, this sleepwalking. Please wake up, break this spell. Make everybody just understand that we are not here to point blame and just to call out people just for fun. This isn't about making any kind of profit. This is about really looking at the data, and the data speaks. Well, the problem is we only allow one side of the argument to be on TV, to have an opinion.
We'll have to see if that information comes out to support those allegations. Now, Jennifer, I introduced you as a tech entrepreneur. Part of this wider story is, an idea that is also circulating wildly and widely, that currencies, as we have understood them, are on their last legs, be it the dollar or the pound and so on. And we are told on social media that we're being primed for currencies to be replaced with something digital. Now, from a tech entrepreneur's point of view, do you credit that with being believable? Is that the way you see things going?
Yes, sir. And I just want to say thank you for allowing me to speak with you on this topic. Thank you, GB News, for allowing me this opportunity, and other news sources, Uncut News. Thank you guys for reaching out and speaking to the people. But yes, in every life cycle of currencies, there comes to an end. And we are at the end of this petrodollar. They can QE inflate it away. They can print all they want. They can allocate all the SDR, the special drawing rights, which ultimately debases our currencies, all global currencies, which is exactly as they have done. We are coming to the end of the petrodollar. And when that dollar dies, we are going to be transitioning into a blockchain-backed system, a digital currency. All the payments will run together on what is known as the interledger protocol on these different payment rails with different blockchains. It's going to be amazing. The surveillance stuff that's coming with it is a threat, yes. But everything that they are trying to push, the biometric, comes on the application layer. This is an application that can be removed using digital blockchain, digital currency, and utilizing the beauty of blockchain and these interledger protocol is not synonymous with creepy biometric surveillance state. This is what people have to understand.
So blockchain is what underpins cryptocurrencies. Yes. Bitcoin,
yes, sir.
And so on. And so you're thinking...
And the majority of them right now are built off Bitcoin and Ethereum, and they're forks of the two.
So there's a way of having blockchain-based digital currencies that don't necessarily have to come with surveillance state technology. Is that what you're saying? That you can have the good bit and not have the Chinese Communist Party apart from the big boys book of totalitarian regimes?
Yes. And for every, this government that's really a crime syndicate and pulling out all the stops to, silence and enslave everyone, this fierce push to vaccine passports is ultimately to try to collect all the biometric data to create this system that will interoperate with payments. Now, we can use these payments and have them backed by hard assets, precious metals, and we can still use cash that's, backed by metals. And we can interoperate, and that is why the ISO accreditation, the certain ISO coins, so XRP, XLM, XDC, Algo, certain, crypto will rise in this shift into the new, financial world. And instead of being something to fear, everyone, you guys, we must fear the system we're in right now. This central bank system is not secure. We've been trained and told and indoctrinated our entire lives to use the central banks. And yes, of course, they will tell you that your money is safe. I'm not here to scare anyone. What I'm saying is we need to look at history and we need to understand what bail-ins are and how at the end of a life cycle, governments and their institutions do all kinds of crazy things. Liquidity crisis, surges of inflation. I mean, they're talking transitory, non-transitory. Come on, inflation is coming. And we're going to see all of this as we transition away from the petrodollar into blockchain and the new financial technologies that await. I do not believe that CBDCs are something to be feared. In fact, I understand how the internet was designed and where we're moving. And I can tell you the creepy biometric stuff is just an application. Remove it. At the end of the day, a lot of these currencies run through satellites. They're not going to be contingent on the internet as we know it. The internet will completely change. And this is a great thing. This is the wonderful part of adoption with technology. But I do not, under any circumstances, want to endorse, those powers that be and everybody that follows blindly to accept this next, draconian surveillance state. When the dollar dies, we the people demand transparency, interoperability, and complete a revamp, of the financial system. We can't stay the way we are. It's not working.
It's fascinating talking to you, listening to you, Jennifer, and I have in fact let this run on longer so that I can't do my all sorts for this evening. But thank you very much for being with me. That's all we have time for tonight. Thank you, Jennifer. Thanks to all my guests for all your contributions from home. Coming up next is Alistair Stewart live. First, though, we have to go to the weather.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern. It's going to be increasingly windy and cloudy this evening with rain in places, and then, well, that sets us up for an unsettled weekend. One low after another arriving from the Atlantic. We've had high pressure in place during Friday, and that's led to a fine day for most of us, but the isobars are now tightening across the northwest. Rain soon arrives during the evening into Northern Ireland, western Scotland as well, falling as snow above 300 or 400 metres for a time across Scotland as well as the Pennines. But eventually the strong and in places gale force southwesterly winds will bring milder air, so that turning to rain at all levels. Ahead of it, eastern England, perhaps a touch of frost in places first thing during the night, but temperatures rising by dawn, and as a result it's a frost-free start for most, but it's a windy start. The coastal gales in western Scotland transferring to Irish Sea coasts. The rain initially light and on and off, turning more heavy and persistent for northern England, Wales, and pushing into the Midlands as well as southwest England by the afternoon. To the southeast, staying dry and bright, 8 Celsius here. To the north, Scotland and Northern Ireland, blustery showers, but a little milder, 10 or 11 Celsius. It's within this central zone, Northern England into the Midlands, Wales, and then eventually southern parts of the England, where we're going to see some spells of rain into the evening, easing off for a time before the next bout of wet and windy weather arrives by dawn into western parts of Wales and England. On Sunday morning, we'll start off with temperatures at around 5 to 8 Celsius in most places. Some brighter spells for eastern and northern Scotland at first, but for the vast majority